why do you sit zazen? Why do you do this meditation thing?
It's a good question. I think it is the best way to learn to manage your inner world. And, when I was working and stuff, um, well, I guess I'm still working, but, working, being busy in life, doing lots of things, I think it's pretty common to get the feeling that maybe there's like an unsatisfactoriness to all of it. And it's not that there's anything wrong with the things you're doing or what your life is. It's kind of more of an inside thing, more of a viewpoint or misunderstanding. And so I think throughout my life, I've kind of noticed that. And then when I stumbled upon Buddhism and just reading about it, like as a philosophy, kind of thought, oh, that makes sense. That whole like impermanence thing, the dukkha, where things just seem to be unsatisfactory and you can't really quite explain why. And so then that's kind of what piqued my interest and got me to start, a small practice, just like 5 minutes here or there, kind of just
Hmm.
on my own, trying to do what I read, and then realized, oh, I think there is something to this. And then, as you start doing it more, you start to kind of see how it changes things or how it changes you, and you kind of get, I guess, greater confidence or
Mm.
more of a desire to kind of continue to see what will happen as you continue to practice, or if you try to maybe deepen practice.
You said something interesting about it being a philosophy. How do you think practicing Buddhism, and in this case, maybe Zen, meaning Zazen, differs from, say, other sort of European philosophies? What's the difference between a Buddhist philosophy and one of those other traditions?
Well, disclaimer: I don't really claim to know much about either, um,
Ah,
but I'm very much new to Zen practice. I consider
mm,
myself a beginner, but I think the biggest difference that I can identify is that Zen for me is a more actionable philosophy, or like a lived philosophy, where a lot of Western philosophy is kind of purely intellectual or abstract. I know there are
mhm.
different philosophies and thoughts about the meaning of life and ethics and stuff like that, but I kind of see Zen as a mix of philosophy and psychology.
Sometimes you fall off and you make excuses or you get busy or you can't actually practice Zazen in a day or a couple days or for a couple of days. How do you get back on? Have you ever just fallen off and stayed off for a while?
It's a good question. About a decade ago, I used to practice pretty intently and lived in a monastery for a while. And then, long story short, I kind of stopped completely, abandoned it, and went back to living a fully normal life. And then, about a year ago, kind of restarted on a smaller scale. If you're already practicing or curious about starting, and it's very much not something that you do every day yet, it's not quite a habit, I would say just set a very low bar for yourself. Try to start with the smallest amount of time you think you can actually do every day. So when I restarted, I started with just doing 5 minutes every morning before I went to work. And I thought, surely I can find 5 minutes. You don't need to be perfect. It's
Uh-huh.
impossible to be perfect. So when you're starting, you have to just accept there's going to be days where you don't do it. Life happens, or you have other commitments that take priority. And so I'd say it's a very personal thing. There's no right or wrong to it. I think don't set yourself up to feel like you're failing. Keep it very light and enjoyable, but just try to maintain the intention of trying to do it, or trying to set time for it on a somewhat
Sure.
regular basis. And then you can always add more later, but just try to start whatever the minimum amount is for you.
Greg, what does it mean to you to practice with or to talk with someone who sits in the teacher's seat in your practice?
I think it is very important. And I think I would even say it's critical. In some ways, I don't want to admit that, but I think it is actually true, where you truly do need the guidance of someone who has greater experience and understanding.
Mhm.
The first go around when I was learning this stuff in college, I mostly learned from reading books
Mhm.
or watching stuff on the internet, and I think it actually led me to a lot of misunderstandings or misconceptions about things.
Mhm.
And because I was kind of practicing in that environment by myself, because I didn't really have access to a teacher, I probably did myself pretty, I kind of dug myself in a hole of like a bad habit, if that makes sense, of misunderstanding.
Mm.
Had I started working with a teacher, I think I could have avoided a lot of that misunderstanding.
What kind of bad habit do you think that you formed?
For lack of a better term, I think I was practicing from an egoic standpoint, and there was a lot of striving and a lot of like desire to become someone that is good at meditation, to
Oh.
become someone that is wise. There was a lot of that reinforcing that like I was becoming someone better, I was improving myself, but it was all kind of built on this foundation of the I, which is like the exact thing that you claim to be trying to see through. It was actually, I think I was reinforcing that subtly. I think having a teacher where you can ask questions and clarify confusion, and maybe they can notice you're speaking about something in a way that isn't quite correct, and they can kind of correct you in real time, is critical and can save you a lot of time and maybe unnecessary stress.
We have spoken about your own skepticism about the sort of spiritual woo-woo side of Buddhism, where there's a lot of interesting iconography and references to characters who have, we might say, unverifiable positions of power, like heavenly beings and bodhisattvas and all these sort of mythical creatures. Even the Buddha has all kinds of myth around who the Buddha was. How do you feel about that?
So that's something that was really difficult for me when I first started.
Hmm.
And I think also kind of why I was in that situation without a teacher is because I didn't grow up with any like religious upbringing, and so I pretty much grew up, I guess you could say, like an atheist, agnostic. Going to like a Buddhist temple or even like a church for that matter would be like a very foreign thing for me to do and kind of out of what I would typically have any experience doing. I also, grew up studying science, history of science and everything, and pretty much very skeptical of any religion. So when I was
Mhm.
trying to learn meditation and stuff, that definitely made it difficult for me to be willing to find a teacher, or to. It was just confusing because you read all these things that sound straightforward, but then you go to like maybe a temple for the first time, and it's like this doesn't really seem like the same thing I was reading about. Seems like there's a lot of weird stuff happening, or
Uh-huh.
it just might seem totally foreign where you're not necessarily judging it, but you're just like, I have no idea what's going on. This is so different. But yeah, I just found it hard to believe any like metaphysical claim. And that's really, I think, what was hard for me is like, if I can't really believe like in reincarnation or, all these heavenly realms and everything, then does any of this still make sense? Like, do you have to believe all that stuff for it to even be, have, to derive benefit from the meditation?
And given your skepticism, well, skepticism sounds like such a pessimistic word.
I'd say it's accurate though. It's
Yeah,
accurate.
okay. Given that skepticism, and if I understand this correctly, from the beginning, without seeking the guidance of a teacher, those things maybe seem more esoteric or inaccessible as to what their meaning might be or how to compartmentalize or how to regard them. Taking up a relationship with a teacher, how has your regard for those things, for that sort of religious iconography and all that spiritual side changed?
I just don't consider them as important or necessarily relevant to me. I don't want to offend anyone or anything like that, but I just kind of see it as cultural traditions, or maybe not to be taken literally. And a lot of the iconography and stuff, it's just passed down through the tradition, and a lot of
Mhm.
the stuff may have been developed at a time where that's what the people who were practicing needed to inspire
Uh,
them and to give them confidence. And over time maybe it's not as relevant anymore, but we continue because it's the tradition that's been passed down. So I kind of just don't, I still don't necessarily like agree or like believe in a lot of it, but I'm not really worried about it being present, kind of just ignore it. I think everyone comes to a meditation practice, whatever it may be, whatever tradition, with their own history and their own background and their own lived experience.
Uh-huh.
And so I don't think anyone should feel like they have to jump in and like instantly be 100% in any system. You should always approach it with whatever your lived experience has been, and then you can kind of get further exposure as you go, and then you can kind of not like pick and choose, but you kind of learn what's relevant and maybe what's not as relevant or not as important to think about. And the teacher can also help you with that. If you have concerns about one certain idea that you don't agree with, you know, maybe it just doesn't matter if you don't think about it, and you don't have to believe in it.
Why did you seek out a teacher? Maybe that's the question.
Gotcha. Well, so I kind of had rekindled my my meditation practice just to try to improve like my mental well-being, because I noticed I was needing some help there.
Mhm.
And then I thought, I really need to find someone that can guide me and help me. So then what was difficult is, there's lots of places in town where I live that are, any basically Buddhist tradition you're interested in, you could probably find it pretty close by. But
Uh-huh.
I just have that hesitancy of going to like a temple and like the religious aspects of it, and kind of being forced into doing all these ceremonial things I don't really care about, where I just wanted to learn the meditation and develop like a relationship with the teacher, like regarding the practice. In my specific situation, I got lucky because we happened to reconnect just randomly,
Yeah.
and because we used to know each other from your time when we lived in the same city. And so I feel like I kind of won the lottery because you were willing to guide me in this endeavor. But um, you being in Japan, me being in America, I don't really have to go to a temple and
Yeah.
do a lot of those ceremonial things. I don't really see value in.
Yeah.
Um, so in that regard, I'm very grateful for your willingness. But I think if someone's watching this, I think they should reach out to Eshin and
Ha
ask
ha ha
him,
ha
because
ha.
I think he'd
Yeah.
be willing to assist you. But if you're looking for something maybe more in person, I would say just keep an open mind, and just try to go, and don't have any preconceptions about it. And don't feel like if you go once, you have to believe everything, or that
Yeah.
you can't go and continue to kind of be skeptical.
Mm.
And then having an affinity with a teacher. I think just like any relationship, having trust is imperative. I think, you know, learning meditation, studying meditation, Zen, you really are working with like your mind and your mental landscape. And I think it does require honesty and a willingness to be vulnerable and to open up to a teacher. So
Mhm.
someone that you really trust or have a positive relationship with is really important, because I feel like if you can't see yourself opening up and being honest with your teacher, they're not going to be able to help you. So finding someone that you can trust and building that relationship over time, I think, is very important.
Mhm. Well put.